Well, that's not going to offer much protection in the event of a crash or a tip over. There is it. Welcome back to my garage, folks. Not long ago, I was out riding my Pan America on some gravel roads, coming to a stop and tucked the front end. Thought I was going to lose it. Thought we were going down. Oh, shit. Now, I did manage to stay upright that time, but it got me thinking. Maybe I'd like to get some better impact protection for these levers here that cost about $100 a piece from Harley Davidson. And like anything else, is probably back ordered until who knows when. So I got the Barkbusters aluminum handguards that they recently released for the Pan America. I was going to go ahead and throw them on today. The actual Barkbuster kit for the Pan America is just the aluminum frames that mount to the bike that offer your impact protection, plus the mounting hardware that you need to install it. And then you buy separately your choice of the plastic deflectors to mount to the front of that. To remove the factory deflectors, we're going to need to use a T25 bit, a T30, and a T45. To take the factory deflectors off, we'll start with the front two screws here. That's your T25. Okay. And then it just pops off the bar end. All right, and then it's a T30 to remove the screws holding the deflector bracket to the hand controls bracket, the lever bracket. And then we're ready to use our T45 to remove the bar end. And of course, exact same thing on the other side. And for installing the Barkbuster kit, we're going to need a 5mm hex bit, a 10mm wrench, a 17mm wrench, and a Phillips screwdriver. And of course, we'll need a couple of torque wrenches when we're ready to tighten everything down. All right, so I got my hardware all laid out. The actual guards are specific for left and right. They get installed so that where it mounts to the end of your handlebar by the grip is where it curves and goes up. So this would be the clutch side. This would be the brake lever side. And then the only other part that's different left and right is this piece that mounts to the front of the bar. The clutch side is curved so it can clear the clutch cable, and then the brake side is just straight across. First, I'm going to install the replacement bar end that threads into the handlebar, and then that is where the Barkbuster guards then thread into. This does have a torque spec in the instructions. They say to torque this to 15.5 foot-pounds, but it's not a hex, so you need to have a open-end wrench. So if you have an open-end crow's feet type that you can put on your torque wrench, you can do that. I do not, so we're going to do it the old-fashioned way, right? Just put it in there good and tight. I'm going to use a little bit of blue Loctite on this because a little Loctite never hurt anything when we're trying to keep things from coming loose. Especially given that once this is installed, you can't really check to make sure that it's tight without disassembling things. All right. It is aluminum threads inside the handlebar, so we don't want to go too tight. Next, I'm going to loosely install this clamp assembly around the handlebar. So I recommend taking off this little cable wrap just so that you can move your cables out of the way as needed. When you install these clamps, there's a machined recess on the edge inside the clamps. on both sides, on each side, when you put those together, that recess should face inwards towards the middle of the bike. So slide this one under, get this one over like that. The shorter of your bolts goes facing the front of the bike. And the longer of your bolts goes into clamp facing the rear. Going to get those lock nuts started just until they start to grab the threads, so that this is plenty loose and I can move it around as I'm fitting the rest of the guard. Again, just leaving everything loose until we're ready to get it all lined up and tighten it all down. All right, now we're ready to start tightening things down, and starting with the bolt that goes into the handlebar end. So the instructions say that ideally this part of the bar should be horizontal. I'm up on the center stand, so the bike's going to pitch forward a little bit, kind of throwing that off, but I also like to line it up pretty even with the lever. All right, so that looks good there. I'm going to go ahead and just snug it for now, and I'll come back with the torque wrench when I set the rest of them. So we still have this assembly loose over here, so we want to make sure that nothing is like kind of binding up before we go to tighten things down. So the next step is to tighten the bolt that goes through the front of the handguard into the bracket. And again, I'm just kind of snugging it down for now, and I'll come back with the torque wrench. Next, I'm tightening the bolts going through the clamp, the screws that go into the lock nuts underneath, starting with the one on the front. Again, I'm not going too tight yet. I'll come back with the torque wrench and do that. And then we follow up with the one on the rear. With my torque wrench now, I'm going to go ahead and set all of these, starting with the one on the bar end, and the spec in the instructions for that is 20 Newton meters or 14.8 foot-pounds. So I have my torque wrench set to 20 Newton meters, and we'll hold that guard, keep it from moving on this. There we go. Next is the screw that goes through the front of the hand guard. This one is also 20 Newton meters, or the 14.8 foot-pounds. There we go. And then the two screws on top of the clamp. Each of those are set to just 10 Newton meters, so you might need to drop down to a smaller torque wrench. And that also equates to about 89 inch-pounds. All right, first we do the front one. And then the one towards the back. Before putting the plastic handguard on, we'll go ahead and put this cable wrap back in place. The VPS handguards that I went with have these extra little deflectors that you can install on them depending on how much wind you want to block or allow through. You could either install them in the high position for the most wind protection. There's a low position that you can install them in, or of course you could just forego without them completely. So I'm going to try them in the low position. Now the only thing left to do is to fit the plastic handguard onto the aluminum bar itself. And there's 2 pre-drilled holes in the bar. So we just line those up with the holes in the plastic cover there. All right, here's what it looks like from the rider's view, if you will. Plenty of room. Lever's not going to hit that. Fingers have plenty of room there. All right, now I just need to do the right side of the bike. One tip is to use a level or the angle finder app on a smartphone to make sure that the handguard levels are identical on left and right before you tighten everything down. And that's all there is to it. So now I got protection from the wind and any rocks that happen to get kicked up towards my hands, but also should have some good impact protection should this bike hit the ground, protecting my levers and controls. All in all, as you see, pretty simple job to do. Shouldn't take you much more than an hour to take off the old factory deflectors, putting these on. As always, thanks for watching. Ride safe out there.